Power is an illusion. In the shadowy boardrooms of New York City, Dante Moretti believed he held the reins of the underworld. He had the money, the respect of the five families, and the woman of his dreams sitting across from him. But in the world of organized crime, the knife that cuts deepest is always held by the hand you hold. It wasn't a rival Don or a federal agent that brought Dante's empire to its knees that night. It was a trembling waitress, a crumpled napkin, and 7 terrified words. Your girlfriend sold you out. They're in position. This is the story of how a single act of courage sparked a war that would paint the city red. The air inside Ristorante Alloro smelled of truffle oil, aged Barolo, and silent desperation. Located in the heart of Tribeca, it was the kind of establishment where the menu had no prices, and the patrons had no alibis. Clara Evans adjusted her apron, her fingers lingering nervously on the fabric. She had been working the dinner shift at Alloro for 6 months, long enough to learn the unspoken rules. Rule number 1. Never make eye contact with the men at table 4. Rule number 2. Whatever you hear, you bury it. If you talk, you disappear. Tonight, table 4 was occupied by Dante Moretti. Even from the service station, Dante was a gravitational force. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Clara's annual rent, tailored to fit a frame that suggested violence restrained by discipline. He was the underboss of the Vittoria crime family, a man whose name was whispered in fear from the Bronx to Staten Island. His dark hair was swept back, revealing a face that was handsome in a jagged, predatory way. Sitting across from him was Isabella Ricci. She was the envy of every woman in the room, and the desire of every man. Blonde, statuesque, and draped in emerald silk that clung to her like a second skin. She laughed at something Dante said, tilting her head back, her diamond earrings catching the low, ambient light. Champagne, Clara, the floor manager Giuseppe hissed, shoving a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon into her hands. Table 4, don't spill a drop, or it's your head. Clara took a steadying breath. She approached the table, her movements practiced and fluid. Good evening, she murmured, presenting the bottle. Dante didn't look up. His attention was focused entirely on Isabella, his hand resting possessively over hers on the white tablecloth. You seem distracted tonight, Bella, Dante said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the air. You've checked your watch 3 times in 5 minutes. Isabella smiled, but Clara, standing right beside her to pour the wine, saw the tightness in the woman's jaw, the way the tendons in her neck strained. Just anticipation, darling, Isabella purred. It's not every night we celebrate a merger this big. The Russians are finally backing off. Clara poured the champagne. As she retracted the bottle, her eyes flickered to Isabella's lap. The woman's phone was hidden under her napkin, the screen dimmed but visible. A text message notification pulsed silently. Volkov. 10:15 p.m. Exit blocked. Green light. Clara's blood ran cold. The time was 10:12 p.m. She stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew who Volkov was. Nikolai Volkov was the head of the Russian Bratva in Brighton Beach, the Vittoria family's sworn enemy. If Isabella was texting him, if she was coordinating a time... Clara retreated to the kitchen, her mind racing. Walk away, a voice screamed in her head. This isn't your world. If they kill him, they kill him. If you intervene, you're dead. She looked through the swinging portal window. Dante was laughing now, raising his glass to the woman who was about to have him slaughtered. He looked human for a second, unguarded. Clara grabbed a clean cocktail napkin and a pen from the server station. Her hands shook so violently she could barely write. She scribbled 7 words, crushing the paper into a small, tight square. Your girlfriend sold you out. They're in position. She had to get back to the table. She needed a reason. The water glasses were half full. It was thin, but it was all she had. She grabbed a water pitcher. 10:13 p.m. Clara walked back out. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted, though no one else seemed to notice. The shadows felt longer. The music, soft jazz, seemed to drag. She reached table 4. Isabella was applying lipstick, checking her reflection in a compact mirror, eyes darting to the front entrance. Water, sir? Clara asked, her voice cracking slightly. Dante looked up. For the first time, his dark eyes met hers. They were intelligent, piercing eyes that missed nothing. He frowned. sensing her fear. He thought it was just intimidation, a common reaction to his presence. "Please," Dante said. Clara poured. As she lifted the pitcher, she feigned a stumble, bumping the table slightly. "Oh, I am so sorry, sir," she gasped. "Careful," Isabella snapped, looking at her dress with disdain. "Clumsy girl." "Apologies," Clara whispered. In the chaos of the bump, she slid the crumpled napkin directly under the base of Dante's heavy crystal whiskey tumbler. She made eye contact with him again. She didn't look away. She widened her eyes slightly, a desperate, silent plea. Look at it." Dante paused. He was a man who survived on instinct. He saw the terror in the waitress's eyes, and he saw that it wasn't the fear of a spilled drink. It was the fear of death. Clara backed away rapidly, disappearing into the kitchen. Dante's fingers brushed the base of his glass. He felt the paper. "What's wrong?" Isabella asked, checking her watch again. 10:14 p.m. "You look tense." "Just thinking," Dante said, his voice flat. He lifted the glass, palming the note in a sleight of hand that would have made a magician jealous. He brought the napkin into his lap below the table and unfolded it with one hand. He glanced down. The world stopped. The ambient noise of the restaurant fell away. "Your girlfriend sold you out." He looked at Isabella. Really looked at her. He saw the sweat on her hairline. The way her eyes kept flicking to the darkened window facing the street. The way she had insisted they sit at this specific table, near the center, exposed. Isabella smiled, a beautiful, poisonous thing. "I love you, Dante." "Do you?" Dante asked. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like ice cracking. He kicked the heavy oak table upward. "Get down!" Dante roared. The front window of Ristorante Alloro exploded inward. Shards of glass became shrapnel, spraying across the dining room like diamond dust. The thwip, thwip, thwip of suppressed automatic fire tore through the velvet upholstery and the expensive plaster walls. Dante had moved with a speed that defied physics. In the split second before the glass shattered, he had grabbed the edge of the heavy table and flipped it, creating a makeshift barricade. He was on the floor, his Sig Sauer P-226, drawn from his shoulder holster, before the first scream echoed through the hall. Isabella wasn't so lucky. Or perhaps she was simply in the wrong spot. She had stood up to signal the shooters, expecting to be spared. The first volley of bullets, meant for Dante's chest, ripped through the space where he had been sitting a second ago. Dante didn't look for her. He knew the rules of the game. If she was the bait, she was expendable to the Russians. "Back! Everyone to the back!" Dante bellowed, firing 3 controlled shots over the rim of the table toward the shattered window. 2 shadows in the street dropped. Pandemonium erupted. Patrons were screaming, crawling over one another. The expensive tranquility of the restaurant had turned into a slaughterhouse. Dante scanned the room. His security detail, 2 men parked outside, were likely dead. He was alone. No, not alone. He looked toward the kitchen door. The waitress, the girl with the terrified eyes. She had saved his life. And if Volkov's men swept the building, they would kill everyone to leave no witnesses. Dante made a decision. He wasn't a hero, but he paid his debts. He broke cover, sprinting low across the floor, as bullets chewed up the parquet flooring behind him. He shoulder-checked the kitchen doors, bursting into the stainless steel sanctuary, the cafe. Chefs and staff were huddled in the corner, praying. Clara was standing by the rear exit, frozen, her hand on the latch. "You!" Dante barked, pointing the gun at her. Clara screamed, throwing her hands up. "I helped you?" "I know," Dante growled, holstering the weapon but grabbing her wrist with a grip of iron. "Which is why you're coming with me. If they find you, they'll torture you to find out how I knew. You're a loose end, Clara." "My name is—" "I don't care. Move." He kicked the back door open. The alleyway was dark, smelling of wet cardboard and garbage. Rain had started to fall, slicking the cobblestones. "My car is 2 blocks over," Dante said, pulling her along. Clara stumbled, her server shoes slipping on the wet pavement. "I can't. I have a life. I can't just leave," Clara cried, struggling against his grip. Dante spun around, pinning her against the brick wall of the alley. His face was inches from hers, his eyes wild with adrenaline. Listen to me closely. You entered the game the second you passed that note. Isabella Ricci is dead. Volkov is here. If you stay, you die. If you run alone, you die. You want to live? You stick to me like glue. Clara looked into his eyes and saw the grim truth. He wasn't threatening her, he was stating a fact. She nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Good. They ran. They burst out of the alley onto Northmore Street. A black SUV screeched around the corner, tires smoking. Yours? Clara gasped. Theirs. Dante cursed. The side door of the van slid open. An AK-47 barrel protruded. Dante shoved Clara behind a parked delivery truck, just as the street lit up with muzzle flashes. He returned fire, his aim precise. He hit the driver of the SUV through the windshield. The vehicle swerved violently, crashing into a fire hydrant. Water geysered into the air, mixing with the steam of the smashed radiator. Let's go, Dante grunted, grabbing her hand again. They ran toward a nondescript gray sedan parked halfway down the block, his ghost car, a vehicle registered to a dead man kept for emergencies exactly like this. Dante threw her into the passenger seat and vaulted into the driver's side. He keyed the ignition, the engine roaring to life. As he peeled away from the curb, Clara looked back. Smoke was billowing from Ristorante Alloro. The sirens were wailing in the distance, a chaotic symphony for a city that never sleeps. Dante drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand checking the rearview mirror. He navigated the West Side Highway at 90 miles per hour, weaving through traffic. Where are we going? Clara asked, her voice trembling. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering. Dante didn't look at her. His jaw was set, his mind already calculating the next 10 moves. The betrayal cut deep. Isabella. He had trusted her. He had let her into his bed, into his plans. And she had sold him to the Russians for territory or money. We're going to the only place in New York where the devil can't find us, Dante said. And once we're safe, you're going to tell me exactly how a waitress at a posh pasta joint knew about a hit by the Russian Bratva before the Dawn of New York did. Clara swallowed hard. She looked at the man beside her. A killer, a kingpin, and now, her only chance of survival. I speak Russian, she whispered. Dante's eyes flicked to her, narrowing. Is that so? A waitress who speaks fluent Russian and serves champagne to the Mafia. He accelerated, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. It seems, Kara, that we both have secrets. The Brooklyn-Queens Expressway was a ribbon of wet asphalt under the orange glare of sodium vapor lights. Dante drove with a predatory focus, checking his mirrors every 4 seconds. The gray sedan, a nondescript Ford Fusion, with plates registered to a long-deceased accountant from Jersey City, blended perfectly into the late-night traffic. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her knees pulled up to her chest. The adrenaline that had propelled her out of the restaurant was fading, replaced by a cold, shaking shock. She looked at her hands. They were stained with soot from the alleyway and, she realized, with a jolt, a speck of blood that wasn't hers. Stop shaking, Dante commanded. His voice was calm, devoid of the chaos that had just occurred. It draws attention. I just saw a woman die, Clara snapped, her voice brittle. I think I'm allowed to shake. Dante glanced at her. The dashboard lights cast shadows across his sharp cheekbones. You didn't see a woman die. You saw a traitor get liquidated. There's a difference. In this life, loyalty is the only currency. She spent hers. He took the exit toward Red Hook, guiding the car through the industrial labyrinth of warehouses and shipping containers. The neighborhood was quiet, the cobblestone streets slick with rain. He pulled up to a converted brick warehouse near the waterfront, stopping in front of a rusted rolling garage door. He pressed a remote clipped to the visor. The door groaned and began to lift. Welcome to purgatory, Dante muttered. He drove inside. The garage was empty save for a few tarps and a workbench. As the door rattled shut behind them, sealing them in darkness, Dante killed the engine. The silence was deafening. Get out, he said. Clara fumbled with the door handle. Her legs felt like jelly as she stepped onto the concrete. The air inside smelled of sawdust, oil, and stale coffee. Dante moved efficiently. He went to a metal cabinet, punched in a code, and pulled out a first aid kit and a fresh magazine for his Sig Sauer. He placed the gun on the hood of the car, the metal clacking loudly. "Strip," he said. Clara froze. She wrapped her arms tighter around her apron. "What?" Dante turned to face her. His expression wasn't lecherous. It was purely clinical, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You're a waitress who speaks Russian. You knew exactly when the hit was going down. For all I know, you're wearing a wire. Or a tracker." "I saved your life!" Clara shouted, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "If I wanted you dead, I would have just let you drink your water and catch a bullet. Or maybe you're the fallback plan. Maybe Volkov wanted to take me alive and you're the shepherd." Dante stepped closer, invading her personal space. He radiated heat and danger. "I don't take chances. Not tonight. Coat, apron, dress. Now." Clara stared at him, defiance warring with fear. She saw the resolve in his eyes. This was a man who had likely killed people for less than disobedience. Trembling, she untied her apron and let it drop to the floor. She unbuttoned her cardigan. Then, with shaking fingers, she unzipped the back of her black service dress. She stepped out of it, standing in her slip and undergarments, shivering in the drafty garage. She felt exposed, humiliated, and small. Dante didn't ogle her. His eyes scanned her body, like he was searching for a concealed weapon or a bulge of a battery pack. He checked the waistband of her slip. He checked her shoes. "Turn around," he ordered. She obeyed, tears stinging her eyes. "Clear," Dante said after a moment. He tossed a heavy flannel shirt at her. It smelled of him, gunpowder, and expensive cologne. "Put that on. You're freezing." Clara pulled the shirt on, buttoning it to her chin. It swallowed her frame, reaching down to her knees. "Can I ask you something now?" she asked, her voice regaining some of its edge. "You can try." Dante walked over to a heavy steel door leading to the living quarters, unlocking 3 separate deadbolts. "Why didn't you check Isabella?" Clara asked. Dante paused, his hand on the doorknob. His back stiffened. "I mean," Clara continued, her voice trembling, "you said loyalty is currency. You didn't check her for a wire. You didn't check her phone. You just trusted her." Dante turned slowly. The look on his face could have frozen the Hudson River. "Isabella was with me for 2 years. She knew my mother. She knew my secrets." He took a breath, pushing the pain down into a dark box in his mind. "And that is exactly why she is dead, and you are alive. Because I made the mistake of thinking I could have a normal life with a civilian. I won't make that mistake again." He opened the door. "Inside. We need to talk about Nikolai Volkov." The living quarters were surprisingly modern, a stark contrast to the garage. Exposed brick walls, leather furniture, and a wall of monitors displaying camera feeds of the street and the alley. Dante went straight to a wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He slid one across the granite island to Clara. "Drink. It's Macallan 25. Probably costs more than you make in a month." Clara took the glass. She didn't drink. "I don't want your money, and I don't want your liquor. I want to know when I can go home." "Home?" Dante laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Clara, you don't have a home anymore. Volkov's men will have already scrubbed the restaurant's employee records. They know your name. They know your address. If you go back to your apartment, you'll find 2 men waiting to drill holes in your kneecaps to find out where I am." Clara dropped the glass. It didn't break, but whiskey splashed over the counter. "You're joking." "I never joke about business," Dante said, grabbing a rag to wipe the spill. "Now, sit down. Tell me how a girl named Clara Evans knows the dialect of a Brighton Beach butcher." Clara climbed onto a bar stool. She felt trapped, the reality of her situation settling in like a heavy stone. "My mother was American," Clara began, her voice quiet. "But my father was a gambling addict. He owned a small dry cleaner in Little Odessa. He borrowed money from the wrong people to keep the machines running." Dante took a sip of his drink, watching her over the rim. "Volkov?" "His predecessor." "A man named Yuri," Clara whispered. "But Volkov was the enforcer back then." He used to come to the shop every Friday to collect. I was 10 years old. I would hide under the counter. She looked up at Dante, her eyes hard. They didn't think I understood them. They would talk business right in front of me. Who they were hurting, who they were bribing. So I learned. I bought books. I listened. I learned their slang, their codes. I thought if I understood them, I could predict them. I could save my dad. Did you? Dante asked softly. Clara shook her head. No. One Friday, the payment was short. Volkov didn't yell, he didn't scream, he just locked the front door and burned the shop down with my father inside. They ruled it an electrical fire. Dante was silent. He knew the story. He remembered reading the police report on the fire years ago. Collateral damage and the fee. Turf wars of the early 2000s. So, Dante said, you hate them. I hate them more than I fear them, Clara said. Tonight, when I saw Isabella's phone, I saw the name Volkov. And then I heard her say, green light in Russian on the phone in the bathroom before she sat down. She thought she was whispering. Dante's grip on his glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. She made the call from the bathroom? Yes, she said. The lion is eating. Green light for dessert. Dante closed his eyes. The lion. That was his nickname in the press. You have a good ear, Dante said, opening his eyes. And you have guts. Putting that note under my glass. That was suicide. I couldn't let Volkov win again, Clara said. Dante nodded. He walked around the counter and stood in front of her. For the first time, he looked at her not as a liability, but as an asset. Listen to me, Clara. We are in a war now. Volkov didn't act alone. He doesn't have the manpower to hit a made man of the Vittoria family in the middle of Tribeca without sanction. Someone from my side, someone high up, open the door for him. Who? That's what we're going to find out, Dante said. He walked to the wall of monitors. But first, we have to die. Excuse me? As far as the world knows, Dante Moretti died at Ristorante Alloro tonight, Dante said, pointing to the screen. On the news feed, a banner flashed. Shootout in Tribeca. Mafia underboss presumed dead. We need to stay dead, Dante said, turning back to her. It's the only way to see who comes to the funeral to spit on the grave. The safe house had no windows, only vents that hummed with the rhythmic thrum of filtered air. Time became a fluid concept, measured only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and the constant loop of news on the muted television. It had been 12 hours since the shooting. Dante sat at a large oak table covered in schematics, burner phones, and a disassembled laptop. He had changed into a black tactical turtleneck and cargo pants, looking less like a mob boss and more like a private military contractor. Clara had curled up on the leather sofa, drifting in and out of a restless sleep. Every time a car drove by outside, creating a subtle vibration in the floor, she jolted awake. Stop worrying, Dante said without looking up from the laptop. The walls are reinforced concrete. An RPG couldn't get through here. Clara sat up, rubbing her face. That's not comforting, Dante. It should be. He spun the laptop around. Come here. I need your eyes. Clara hesitated, then walked over. On the screen was a grainy surveillance photo taken from a long distance. It showed a meeting on a park bench. Do you recognize him? Dante asked, pointing to a man in a beige trench coat. Clara squinted. I'm not sure. Who is he? That, Dante said, his voice laced with venom, is Silas Vance. He's a corrupt DEA agent. He's been on my payroll for 5 years. He's supposed to tip me off about raids. And he didn't tip you off about Volkov? No, Dante said, which means he's flipped, or he's been bought by the highest bidder. Dante stood up and began pacing the room. The structure of the Vittoria family is built on a pyramid. There's the Don, my father Lorenzo. He's sick, retired in Sicily. Then there's me, the acting boss. Below me are 3 capos, captains. He held up 3 fingers. Capo 1, Salvatore Sally Vistoso, runs the unions and the docks. Greedy, but loyal to the dollar. He wouldn't work with Russians. He hates them. Capo 2. Mikey, the butcher, Genovese. No relation to the other family. He's a sadist, but he's stupid. He doesn't have the brains to orchestrate a coup. And Capo 3. Dante's voice trailed off. Who is Capo 3? Clara asked. Julian Thorne, Dante said softly. The financial wizard. The man who washes the money. He went to Harvard. He wears suits that cost more than my car. He's the one who introduced me to Isabella. The silence in the room was heavy. Isabella, Clara whispered. If he introduced you. Exactly, Dante said. Thorne has always wanted the throne. He thinks the old ways, the violence, the honor, are outdated. He wants to run the family like a Fortune 500 company. And Volkov represents a massive new market. Drugs, human trafficking, things I forbade the family from touching. Dante slammed his fist onto the table. It's Thorne. It has to be. So what do we do? Clara asked. Call the police? Call your other capos? I can't calling anyone, Dante explained, frustration tightening his jaw. If Thorne has made a move, he's already told the other capos that I'm dead, or, worse, that I was the traitor. If I call Sally or Mikey now, they might just put a bullet in me to secure their own positions. In a power vacuum, chaos reigns. He walked over to a wall safe hidden behind a painting of the Amalfi Coast. He spun the dial. Left 30, right 12, left 55. The safe clicked open. Dante reached inside and pulled out a small velvet bag and a black ledger. This, he said, tossing the ledger onto the table, is the insurance policy. It contains the routing numbers for every offshore account Thorne manages. If I release this to the IRS, the entire family goes down. Thorne knows I have it. That's why he tried to kill me instead of just exiling me. He needs this book. So we have leverage, Clara said. We have a target on our backs, Dante corrected. Thorne won't stop until he has this book, or until he knows for sure I'm a corpse. Suddenly, Dante winced, his hand flying to his side. He hissed in pain, grabbing the edge of the table. Dante, Clara rushed to him. What is it? Nothing, he grunted through gritted teeth. Just a scratch. Let me see. Clara pushed his hand away. His black turtleneck was wet on the left side. She pulled the fabric up. There, just above his hip bone, was a jagged, angry gash. A bullet had grazed him, a mere inch from puncturing his kidney. The adrenaline had masked the pain, but now the wound was bleeding sluggishly and looked inflamed. You're shot, Clara exclaimed. I've had worse shaving cuts, Dante lied, though his face was pale. Sit down, Clara ordered. Where is the first aid kit? I don't need. Sit down, Dante, Clara yelled. It was the first time she had raised her voice at him in command. Dante looked at her, surprised by the ferocity in her tone. He sat down heavily on the chair. Clara grabbed the kit she had seen earlier. She knelt beside him, her hands steady now. She had bandaged scraped knees and cut fingers at the restaurant, but this was different. This was flesh and blood and violence. She poured antiseptic onto a gauze pad. This is going to burn. Dante didn't flinch as she pressed the alcohol-soaked pad against the raw flesh. He watched her. She was focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. She wasn't the trembling girl from the restaurant anymore. She was adapting. Why are you helping me? Dante asked quietly. You could have run when I was checking the perimeter earlier. You could have stolen the car. Clara applied an antibiotic ointment and began taping a clean bandage over the wound. She didn't look up. Because my father died alone. He didn't have anyone to watch his back against these monsters. I won't let that happen again, not if I can help it. She finished the bandage and pulled his shirt back down. Her hand lingered on his side for a fraction of a second too long. The heat between them was palpable, a strange magnetic pull born of shared trauma. She stood up, stepping back quickly. There, you'll live. Dante stood up, testing his range of motion. Thank you. He walked back to the monitors. We need to move. We can't stay here. Why? You said it was a fortress. It is, Dante said. But fortresses are just prisons with better locks. If Thorn figures out I'm alive, he'll check the safe houses. We need to go somewhere he would never look. Where? Dante turned to her, a grim smile playing on his lips. We're going to the lion's den. We're going to crash the wake. The wake? My wake, Dante said. They're holding a memorial service tonight at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a private viewing for the Caen family. It's the perfect place for Thorn to solidify his power. He'll be there, gloating, and he'll be surrounded by the other capos. You want to walk into a church filled with men who want to kill you? Clara asked, incredulous. No, Dante said. I want to walk in and remind them why they used to call me the Devil of Tribeca, but I can't do it alone. I need eyes. I need someone who can get close to Thorn without being recognized as a threat. He looked at Clara. No. Clara backed away. Absolutely not. I am a waitress. I am not a spy. You are the only person in this city I trust, Dante said, his voice intense. Thorn doesn't know you. To him, you were just collateral damage at the restaurant. A faceless victim. He reached into the duffel bag on the floor and pulled out a sleek black dress and a pair of heels. He had stocks of supplies for various associates in all his safe houses. Put these on, Dante said. Tonight, you're not Clara the waitress. Tonight, you're Natalia Romanova, a representative from the Russian syndicate coming to pay respects and to deliver a message. You want me to pretend to be Russian? Clara gasped. You speak the language, Dante said. You know the slang. You can walk right up to Volkov's envoy and Thorn, and you can plant a seed of doubt that will tear their alliance apart. Clara looked at the dress, then at Dante. The man who had saved her. The man who was fighting the same evil that had destroyed her childhood. She took a deep breath. The fear was still there, pounding in her chest like a drum, but beneath it was something else, a cold, hard anger. What's the message? Clara asked. Dante grinned, and it was terrifying. You're going to tell Thorn that Volkov is double-crossing him, and you're going to tell Volkov that Thorn is selling him to the feds. You're going to light a match, Clara, and we're going to watch them burn. The rain over Manhattan had turned into a deluge, hammering against the Gothic spires of St. Patrick's Cathedral like a relentless judgment. Inside the massive bronze doors, the air was thick with the scent of frankincense and expensive lilies. The 5 families had gathered to mourn Dante Moretti. It was a spectacle of hypocrisy. Men who had spent years plotting Dante's demise now stood in the pews, heads bowed, dabbing at dry eyes with silk handkerchiefs. The organ music was a low, mournful drone that vibrated in the chest. At the front of the nave, near the altar, stood the closed casket, mahogany, polished to a mirror shine, draped in white roses. Standing next to it, accepting condolences with the grace of a grieving brother, was Julian Thorn. Thorn looked every inch the successor. He wore a bespoke suit that fit his slender frame perfectly. His hair was slicked back, his face a mask of solemn dignity. But his eyes were restless, scanning the room, counting the heads, calculating the alliances. A beautiful service, Julian. Salvatore, Sally, Vistoso grunted, shaking Thorn's hand. Sally was a heavy man, sweating profusely despite the cool air of the cathedral. A tragedy, a real tragedy, to be taken out by street thugs while eating pasta. Indeed, Sally, Thorn replied, his voice smooth as velvet. But we must remain strong. For the family. Dante would have wanted us to move forward without delay. Of course, Sally nodded, moving down the line. Thorn checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. The Russian delegation was late. He felt a flicker of irritation. Volkov was getting sloppy. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the cathedral creaked open. The sound cut through the organ music, turning heads. A woman stepped out of the rain and into the nave. She was stunning and terrifying in equal measure. She wore a black dress that was modest in cut, but severe in style, hugging her figure before flaring out. A black fascinator with a heavy veil obscured the upper half of her face, leaving only her lips, painted a deep, blood red, visible. She walked with a confident, rhythmic click of heels on the stone floor, flanked by no one. She didn't look like a mourner. She looked like an omen. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? Is that a mistress? A relative from Sicily? Clara Evans kept her chin high, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Underneath the veil, her eyes were wide with terror. But she forced herself to remember Dante's coaching in the car. Walk like you own the ground beneath your feet. Do not apologize. Do not hesitate. She walked straight down the center aisle, ignoring the hundreds of eyes boring into her. She stopped 3 feet from Julian Thorne. Thorne frowned, his polite mask slipping slightly. Signorina? I don't believe we've met. Are you a friend of Dante's? Clara stared at him through the mesh of her veil. She didn't answer immediately. She let the silence stretch, making him uncomfortable. I am not a friend, Clara said, adopting the accent she had practiced. The clipped, hard consonants of a Moscow native who learned English in a boardroom. I am a consequence. Thorne stiffened. I beg your pardon? Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Thorne could hear. Nikolai sends his regards. But he is displeased. Thorne's eyes darted around. Who are you? I am Natalia, Clara lied smoothly. I handle Nikolai's external audits. We have a problem, Mr. Thorne. The ledger. Thorne's face went pale. The ledger? That was supposed to be destroyed in the restaurant. It was not, Clara hissed. Our sources tell us Dante moved it before dinner. And now we hear rumors. Rumors that you plan to hand over the Russian operations to the FBI in exchange for immunity when you take the throne. That's a lie, Thorne whispered harshly, sweat breaking out on his upper lip. I have a deal with Volkov. Nikolai does not trust deals made with ghosts, Clara said coldly. He thinks you are cleaning house, using us to kill Dante, then using the feds to kill us. She stepped back, her voice raising slightly, just enough for the nearby capos to hear the tone, if not the words. Fix this, Mr. Thorne, or the next funeral here will be yours. She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Thorne looking as if he had seen a ghost. Clara's legs felt like lead, but she didn't stop. She headed toward the side transept, where a group of grim-faced men in leather jackets stood, the Russian delegation. They stood apart from the Italians, looking like wolves at a dog show. The leader, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, watched her approach. This was Dmitri, Volkov's right hand. You are not family, Dmitri grunted in Russian as she neared. Clara responded in fluent, rapid-fire Russian. And you are not safe, Dmitri? Dmitri blinked, surprised by the language. Who are you? A friend who doesn't want to see you rot in an American prison, Clara said. She nodded subtly toward Thorne, who was now frantically typing on his phone near the altar. Look at him. He is sweating. Do you know why? Dmitri narrowed his eyes. Tell me. Thorne found Dante's insurance file. Clara lied, weaving the web tighter. He isn't destroying it. He's making copies. He plans to give the DEA the routes of your shipments tonight. He wants the Vittoria family clean. He considers the Bratva disposable dirt. Dmitri's hand twitched toward the inside of his jacket. He would not dare. We have an agreement. An agreement with a man who killed his own boss? Clara scoffed. Thorne has no honor. Look at him. He is calling his federal contact right now. It was a gamble. Thorne was likely calling his hitman or checking his bank accounts, but to a paranoid gangster, it looked exactly like betrayal. Dmitri looked at Thorne. Thorne looked up and caught Dmitri's eye. Thorne forced a nervous smile. To Dmitri, that smile looked like guilt. Bitch! Dmitri growled. Not at Clara, but at the situation. He thinks he can play us. Hit him now, Clara whispered. The final push. Before he leaves the church. Once he walks out those doors, he is untouchable. Clara backed away, melting into the shadows of a side pillar. She had done it. She had lit the fuse at both ends. Now, she just had to survive the explosion. The atmosphere in St. Patrick's shifted. The tension was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the congregation. The murmurs died down. The air grew static. Julian Thorne, sensing the shift, stepped up to the podium. He needed to regain control. He adjusted the microphone, the feedback whine echoing sharply. Friends, Thorne began, his voice booming but slightly shaky. We are here to honor a giant. But we must also look to the future. A future of stability. A future of prosperity. From the side, Dmitri stepped out of the shadows. He didn't wait for the speech to end. He walked straight into the center aisle, his heavy boots loud on the stone. "There is no future for you, rat," Dmitri shouted in heavily accented English. The congregation gasped. Hands went to waistbands. The sound of 100 safety catches clicking off filled the cavernous space like the chittering of insects. Thorne gripped the podium. "Dmitri, this is a place of worship. We can discuss business later." "Business is done," Dmitri snarled. He pulled a Makarov pistol from his jacket. "You sell us to feds? We send you to hell." "No, it's a lie," Thorne screamed, pointing into the crowd. "Where is that woman? She lied to you." But it was too late. The paranoia had taken root. "Kill him!" Dmitri ordered his men. "Defend the boss!" Sally Vistoso shouted, though he looked unsure. Chaos erupted. The first shot shattered a stained glass window high above, showering the pews in multicolored shards. The congregation scrambled, diving under benches, screaming. The Italians and the Russians drew weapons, turning the house of God into a war zone. Thorne ducked behind the heavy marble altar just as bullets chipped away the stone where his head had been. "Stop! Stop firing!" Thorne screamed into his phone. "It's a setup!" In the confusion, no one noticed the figure emerging from the confession booth near the altar. Dante Moretti stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing the black tactical gear from the safe house, a ballistic vest strapped tight to his chest, an AR-15 rifle in his hands. He didn't fire. He simply walked up the steps to the pulpit, moving with the terrifying calmness of the Reaper himself. He kicked the microphone stand, knocking it over with a deafening screech that caused everyone, Russians and Italians alike, to freeze for a split second. "Enough," Dante's voice roared, projected by his sheer lung capacity and the acoustics of the cathedral. Silence fell. Absolute, stunned silence. Dante stood under the crucifix, looking down at the sea of faces. He looked like a revenant, risen from the grave to drag them all down with him. "Do, Dante?" Sally Vistoso stammered, standing up from behind a pew. You're dead." "I was," Dante said, his gaze fixing on the altar where Thorne was cowering. "But I didn't like the accommodations." He leveled his rifle at the altar. "Stand up, Julian." Slowly, Julian Thorne rose. His face was gray. He looked at Dante, then at the Russians, then at the exits. He was trapped. "Dante," Thorne breathed. I can explain. It was Volkov. He forced me. He threatened the family." "Liar," Dante said calmly. "You sold me out for a percentage. You broke the oldest law. You betrayed your blood." Dante turned his gaze to Dmitri and the Russians. "And you? You come into my city, into my church, and you threaten my family?" "He sold us out," Dmitri shouted, pointing his gun at Thorne. "He works with the feds." "He doesn't work with the feds," Dante said. "He works for himself." "But you..." Dante raised the rifle slightly. "You work for a corpse." "Volkov?" Dmitri sneered. "Volkov is untouchable. Volkov is currently dealing with a gas leak at his Brighton Beach headquarters," Dante said coldly. "Or at least, that's what the fire department will call it when the bomb I planted goes off in 10 minutes. Dimitri's eyes went wide. "Now," Dante said, "you have two choices. You can die here, fighting a ghost. Or you can leave my city. Right now." Dmitri looked at Dante's rifle. He looked at the 50 armed Italian soldiers, who were now realizing their true boss was alive, and were turning their weapons toward the Russians. The odds had shifted instantly. Dmitri spat on the floor. "This is not over, Moretti." "It is for you," Dante replied. The Russians backed away, guns still raised, retreating toward the side exits. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them. Dante turned back to Thorne. The church was silent again, save for the heavy breathing of the men. "Dante, please," Thorne begged, tears streaming down his face. "We grew up together. I'm your brother." "My brother is buried in Queens," Dante said. "You're just a ledger entry I need to correct." Dante didn't shoot him. That would be too quick. He lowered the rifle and looked at Sally Vistoso and Mikey Genovese. He tried to kill me, Dante addressed his capos. He tried to sell the family to the Bratva. What is the penalty for treason? Mikey, the butcher, stepped forward, his face dark with fury. He had been confused before, but now the loyalty kicked in. The boss was alive. The traitor was revealed. Death, Mikey grunted. Take him, Dante commanded. Mikey and two soldiers lunged forward, grabbing the screaming Thorn. They dragged him, kicking and screaming down the aisle, away from the altar, out toward the waiting cars. Dante stood alone on the pulpit. He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His side was throbbing where the bullet had grazed him. He scanned the shadows of the side transept. Clara stepped out. She had removed the veil. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. She walked up the steps to the altar. She looked at the bullet holes in the marble, then at Dante. You have a flair for the dramatic, she said, her voice shaking slightly. It keeps people paying attention, Dante said. He slung the rifle over his shoulder. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid. You did good, Clara, he said softly. You started a war and finished it in 10 minutes. You have ice in your veins. I was terrified, she admitted. That's what makes it bravery, Dante said. So, Clara looked around at the stunned mobsters who were now watching them with a mix of awe and confusion. What happens now? Am I still a loose end? Dante looked at her. He saw the intelligence, the courage, and the beauty that had nothing to do with the dress, and everything to do with the fire inside her. No, Dante said. You're not a loose end anymore. He turned to face his men, still holding her hand. This woman saved the family, Dante announced, his voice echoing. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her, touches me. Capisci? Capisci, Don Dante. 50 voices roared back. Dante looked back at Clara. Let's get out of here. I'm starving. And I know a place that serves terrible pasta but has great exits. Clara laughed, a sound of pure relief. I quit my job, you know. Good, Dante smiled, leading her down the aisle toward the light of the open doors. I have a new position in mind for you. The pay is better, but the hours are killer. They walked out into the rain, not as victim and savior, but as partners in a world they had both survived. 3 months later, the skyline of New York looked the same, but the currents beneath it had shifted entirely. Dante Moretti stood on the balcony of his new penthouse overlooking Central Park. The wind whipped at his coat, but he didn't feel the cold. Behind him, inside the warm glow of the library, Clara sat at a mahogany desk that mirrored his own. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform anymore. She wore a tailored cream suit, reviewing the logistics for the family's legitimate shipping ventures. The transition hadn't been easy. The purge of Thorne's loyalists had been swift and brutal, but necessary. Volkov had retreated to the shadows, his reputation shattered by the, quote, internal gas leak that had decimated his headquarters. The streets were quiet. The unions are asking for a renegotiation on the Jersey docks, Clara called out, not looking up from her tablet. They think you're soft because you stopped the street tax. Dante turned, smiling as he walked back inside. He poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. No more whiskey during business hours. Tell them if they want the old Dante back, I can arrange a meeting. But they might not like the venue. Clara laughed, taking the glass he offered. I'll tell them you're feeling generous. For now. She looked at him, her eyes softening. They hadn't labeled what they were. They were more than lovers, more than partners. They were survivors who had forged a bond in the fire of betrayal. Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glass-encased frame. Inside was a yellowed, crinkled cocktail napkin. Your girlfriend sold you out there in position. He placed it on the desk between them. You should burn that, Clara said, tracing the glass with her finger. It's bad luck. No, Dante said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. It's a reminder. In a world of lies, the truth is the only weapon that matters. And you, Clara, are the only truth I need. Clara smiled, picking up her pen. Then let's get back to work. The empire won't run itself. So what can we learn from the waitress and the mafia boss? Dante Moretti thought he was invincible because of his guns and his money, but his true salvation came from the most unlikely source, a simple act of observation. In a life defined by betrayal, where a girlfriend of 2 years can sell you for a payout, loyalty is the rarest commodity of all. Clara didn't just save a man's life that night, she rewrote her own destiny. She proved that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and passing the note anyway. The story of Dante and Clara reminds us that sometimes, the person who holds your life in their hands isn't the one with the weapon, but the one serving your drink. And that is the story of the napkin betrayal. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more crime dramas like this one. What would you have done if you were Clara? Would you have passed the note, or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I release new videos every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.